In the fading light of Millbrook Valley, Cordelia's tears fell like autumn rain as her father sealed her fate with a handshake. The simple farmer before her seemed nothing more than her prison keeper. The autumn wind carried the scent of dying leaves through the windows of Ashworth Manor, where Cordelia pressed her face against the cold glass, watching her father stride across the courtyard with a man she had never seen before. The stranger wore simple brown wool and a weathered hat, his boots caked with mud from the country roads. Even from her perch in the drawing room, she could see the calloused hands that gestured as he spoke with her father. "Cordelia," her mother's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Come away from that window. Your father wishes to speak with you." The young woman turned slowly, her heart already sinking. Margaret Ashworth stood in the doorway, her hands clasped tightly before her, the same way she held them during Sunday prayers when asking for forgiveness. That gesture meant only one thing: news that would shatter whatever peace Cordelia had managed to find in their crumbling estate. "What does father want, mother? He will explain everything. Please, dear one, come to the library." Cordelia's silk slippers whispered against the worn carpet as she followed her mother through corridors that had once gleamed with prosperity. Now, the wallpaper peeled at the edges, and empty spaces on the walls showed where valuable paintings had once hung. The Ashworth fortune had been bleeding away for years, drop by precious drop, like water through cracked stone. In the library, her father stood beside the fireplace, his grey hair dishevelled and his eyes carrying the weight of a man who had run out of choices. The stranger sat in the leather chair that had belonged to Cordelia's grandfather, looking strangely comfortable among books he likely could not read. "Cordelia, my dear," her father's voice trembled slightly, "I would like you to meet Jasper Thornfield. He owns the largest farm in Millbrook Valley." Jasper rose from his chair, removing his hat to reveal dark hair that needed cutting, and eyes the color of fresh earth after rain. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps only a few years older than her own 20 summers, but his face bore the lines of someone who had spent countless hours under the sun. "Miss Ashworth." His voice was deep, respectful, but rough around the edges like unpolished wood. "Your father has told me much about you." Cordelia's eyes darted between the two men, understanding blooming in her chest like a poisonous flower. "Father, what is the meaning of this?" "Mr. Thornfield has made a very generous offer, my dear. He wishes to marry you." The words hit her like winter wind, stealing her breath. She stared at Jasper Thornfield, taking in his simple clothes, his work-worn hands, the dirt still visible under his fingernails despite his obvious attempt to clean them. This was her father's solution. This farmer, this man of the soil, was to be her salvation. "I beg your pardon." Cordelia's voice rose higher than propriety allowed. "Surely you cannot be serious, father." "Nay, the arrangement would be beneficial for both families," her father continued, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere above her head. "Mr. Thornfield's offer is most generous. He would settle our debts and provide you with a comfortable home." "A comfortable home?" Cordelia's laugh bordered on hysteria. "Look at him. He smells of livestock and earth. His clothes are patched. His hands are those of a labourer. You would have me marry a common farmer?" Jasper's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Her father stepped forward, his face flushing with embarrassment and anger. "Cordelia, you forget yourself. Mr. Thornfield is a respectable man who has made an honest living from his land. I would rather die than marry him." The words burst from her lips before she could stop them, echoing off the library walls. "I would rather throw myself from the highest tower of this house than bind myself to such a man. You cannot ask this of me, father. I am a lady of breeding, not some peasant girl to be bartered away like a prize cow." The silence that followed was deafening. Her mother gasped softly, one hand flying to her throat. Her father's face went white, then red with shame. But it was Jasper's reaction that surprised her most. He simply nodded, as if he had expected nothing less. "I understand your feelings, Miss Ashworth," he said quietly, placing his hat back on his head. Perhaps I was presumptuous in believing this arrangement could work. He turned to her father. Mr. Ashworth, I thank you for your time. I shall take my leave. As he moved toward the door, Cordelia felt a strange pang of something that might have been regret, but she pushed it aside. She was Cordelia Ashworth, daughter of a gentleman, educated in music and French and watercolors. She would not be sold to the first farmer who could pay her father's gambling debts. Mr. Thornfield, her father called desperately. Perhaps if you could give us time to consider. There is nothing to consider, Jasper replied, his hand on the door handle. The lady has made her feelings quite clear. I would not wish to force my company upon someone who finds it so distasteful. After he left, the library felt smaller, the air thicker. Her father sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 57 years. Do you understand what you have done, Cordelia? That man was our last hope. Then we shall find another way, she replied, though her voice sounded less certain than her words. We are Ashworths. We do not surrender our dignity for money. But as she climbed the stairs to her room that evening, passing the empty spaces where family portraits had once hung, Cordelia wondered if dignity would keep them warm when winter came. Through her bedroom window, she could see the lights of Millbrook Valley twinkling in the distance, and somewhere among them was Jasper Thornfield, probably grateful to have escaped marriage to such a proud, foolish girl. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and tried not to think about the way his eyes had looked when she spoke those cruel words, or why the memory of his quiet dignity made her chest feel hollow and strange. 3 days passed, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Cordelia watched from her window as creditors arrived at Ashworth Manor with increasing frequency, their black carriages looking like harbingers of doom against the autumn landscape. Each visitor left her father more hunched, more defeated, until he resembled a scarecrow forgotten in a barren field. On the 4th morning, she found her mother weeping quietly in the morning room, clutching a letter with trembling hands. The paper bore the official seal of Bramwell and Associates, the legal firm that had been circling their estate like vultures for months. What does it say, Mother? Margaret Ashworth looked up with red-rimmed eyes. We have until the end of the month, dear one. If we cannot settle the debts by then, they will take the house. The words settled in Cordelia's stomach like cold stones. The end of the month, barely 3 weeks away. She sank into the chair beside her mother, the silk cushions that had once been a comfort now feeling like mockery. Surely there must be someone who would lend us the money. Father's friends from his club, perhaps? Your father has already asked everyone he knows. Her mother's voice was barely a whisper. They all have their own troubles, or they simply refuse to throw good money after bad. The Ashworth name, once so respected, has become, well, it carries little weight now. That afternoon, Cordelia found herself walking the village streets for the first time in months. Pride had kept her away from Millbrook's shops and Market Square, where she might encounter the pitying looks of merchants who knew of her family's troubles. But desperation had a way of eroding pride, drop by steady drop. The village bustled with autumn preparations. Farmers brought their harvest to market, their wagons heavy with golden corn and fat pumpkins. Children chased each other between the stalls, their laughter ringing clear in the crisp air. It was a world of simple pleasures and honest work, a world she had been taught to look down upon from her elevated position at the manor. Miss Ashworth. She turned to find Mrs. Hartwell, the baker's wife, approaching with a warm smile and flower-dusted apron. What a pleasant surprise to see you in the village. How is your dear mother? She is well, thank you. Cordelia managed a smile, though her heart hammered with embarrassment. Surely everyone knew about her family's situation by now. Village gossip travelled faster than wildfire. I was just speaking with my husband about your father, such a learned gentleman, always so kind when he comes for his morning bread. These are difficult times for many families, you know, but the good Lord provides, doesn't he? Sometimes in the most unexpected ways. Before Cordelia could respond, the sound of horses drew their attention. A magnificent black stallion cantered into the square, its rider sitting straight and confident in the saddle. The horse was clearly valuable. Its coat gleamed like polished obsidian, and its tack was fine leather worked with silver details. The rider dismounted with easy grace, and Cordelia's breath caught in her throat. It was Jasper Thornfield, but not the simple farmer she remembered from their disastrous meeting. Gone were the patched clothes and muddy boots. He wore a well-tailored dark coat, clean riding breeches, and boots that spoke of quality craftsmanship. His hair had been properly cut, and he carried himself with a quiet authority that made people step aside respectfully as he passed. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thornfield," Mrs. Hartwell called warmly. "How lovely to see you in the village." "Mrs. Hartwell." He touched his hat politely, and Cordelia noticed his accent seemed less rough than she remembered. "I trust your family is well." "Very well indeed, thanks to your generosity. My youngest is thriving since you arranged for the doctor's visit. We can never thank you enough." Jasper's eyes swept the square and landed on Cordelia with the force of a physical blow. For a moment, neither moved. She stood frozen, taking in this transformed version of the man she had so cruelly dismissed. He was undeniably handsome. How had she not noticed before? The strong line of his jaw, the intelligence in his dark eyes, the way he commanded attention without seeming to try. "Miss Ashworth." He inclined his head politely, but his voice carried a coolness that made her shiver. "I hope you are well." Yes, quite well, thank you." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That is a beautiful horse. Thunder has been with me for several years. He has excellent bloodlines. His sire was imported from Ireland." Jasper stroked the stallion's neck with obvious affection. "Good breeding always shows, doesn't it? Though I've learned that appearances can be deceiving. Sometimes the most valuable things come in the simplest packages." The subtle barb hit its mark. Cordelia felt her face burn with shame as she remembered her harsh words about his simple appearance. "Mr. Thornfield, about the other day—" "Think nothing of it," he interrupted gently. "You spoke honestly about your feelings. I respect honesty, even when it stings." Mrs. Hartwell looked between them with obvious curiosity. "Mr. Thornfield, have you met our Miss Ashworth properly? Her family has lived at the manor for generations. Such lovely people." "We have been introduced," Jasper replied diplomatically, "though I fear Miss Ashworth found our acquaintance less than agreeable." "Oh, surely not," Mrs. Hartwell laughed. "Why, any young lady would be fortunate to know such a fine gentleman. Mr. Thornfield has been a blessing to our village. The new school, the repairs to the church roof, helping families through difficult times. We're all grateful for his kindness." Cordelia stared at him with growing confusion. A school? Church repairs? These were not the actions of a simple farmer scraping by on his land. These were the charitable works of a man with significant means. "Mrs. Hartwell is too kind," Jasper said modestly. "A man has responsibilities to his community." "Speaking of responsibilities," Mrs. Hartwell continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension between them, "I heard the most distressing news about your family, Miss Ashworth. Surely something can be done. In times like these, neighbours must help neighbours." Cordelia wanted to sink into the cobblestones. To have her family's disgrace discussed so openly in front of Jasper Thornfield of all people was humiliation beyond bearing. "Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Hartwell, but I'm sure everything will work out." Jasper studied her face with those penetrating dark eyes, and she had the uncomfortable feeling he could see straight through her brittle composure to the desperation beneath. "Financial troubles can be overcome with the right approach," he said quietly. "Sometimes pride must be set aside for practical solutions. Pride is sometimes all a person has left," Cordelia replied, lifting her chin defiantly. "Pride keeps no one warm in winter," he countered, "nor does it put food on the table or keep creditors from the door." The words hung between them like a challenge. Mrs. Hartwell excused herself with obvious discomfort, leaving them alone in the busy square. Cordelia found herself caught between anger at his presumption and curiosity about this new version of Jasper Thornfield, who spoke like a gentleman and commanded obvious respect. "You seem different than when we first met," she said finally. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Perhaps you simply weren't looking carefully enough before. Good day, Miss Ashworth." He mounted his stallion with fluid ease and rode away, leaving Cordelia standing in the village square with her world tilted off its axis. The simple farmer she had dismissed so cruelly was clearly much more than he had appeared. But what exactly was he hiding? And why had he allowed her to humiliate him when he could have easily revealed his true status? As she walked home through the lengthening shadows, Cordelia couldn't shake the feeling that she had made a terrible mistake, one that might cost her family everything. The morning mist clung to Ashworth Manor like a shroud, and Cordelia found herself unable to sleep past dawn. Her encounter with Jasper in the village had left her mind spinning with questions that multiplied like autumn leaves in a windstorm. She dressed quietly and slipped from the house before her parents could wake, needing solitude to sort through the confusion that plagued her thoughts. Her feet carried her along the familiar path through the woods that bordered their property, a route she had walked countless times as a child when the world seemed simpler and her future more certain. The trees whispered secrets in the morning breeze, their golden leaves carpeting the ground in a tapestry of fading beauty that matched her family's circumstances perfectly. As she emerged from the woods, she found herself at the edge of Thornfield's land, though she had not consciously chosen this destination. The property stretched before her like something from a dream, far grander than she had ever imagined. Rolling hills dotted with prize cattle, fields of golden grain ready for harvest, and in the distance, a house that made her breath catch in her throat. It was not the simple farmhouse she had envisioned. The structure rose from the landscape like something from a gentleman's magazine. 3 stories of honey-colored stone, with tall windows that caught the morning light, and gardens that spoke of careful tending and considerable expense. Smoke curled from multiple chimneys, and she could see servants moving about their morning duties with the efficiency of a well-managed household. "The view is quite something from this angle, isn't it?" Cordelia spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Jasper sat astride his black stallion, not 20 paces away, watching her with an expression she could not read. He wore riding clothes that would not have looked out of place on any gentleman of her acquaintance, and his seat on the magnificent horse spoke of years of quality instruction. I was merely walking," she stammered, heat flooding her cheeks at being caught staring at his property. "I did not realize I had wandered so far." "The woods can be deceiving," he agreed, dismounting with that same fluid grace she had noticed in the village. "One moment you are on familiar ground, the next you find yourself somewhere entirely unexpected." His words seemed to carry layers of meaning that made her uncomfortable. He approached slowly, leading Thunder by the reins, and she noticed again how different he seemed from their first meeting. The rough edges had been polished away, revealing someone who moved with quiet confidence and spoke with the cultured tones of education. "Your property is quite extensive," she said, gesturing toward the impressive house. "My grandfather built the main house. My father expanded it considerably over the years." Jasper's eyes followed her gaze across his lands. "The Thornfield family has been fortunate in their investments." "Investments?" The word slipped out before she could stop it. "I thought you were a farmer." "I am." His smile held a hint of something that might have been amusement. "Among other things, a man can work the land and still understand commerce, Miss Ashworth. The two are not mutually exclusive." Cordelia felt the familiar sting of having revealed her prejudices. "Of course, I did not mean to imply otherwise." "Didn't you?" His question was gentle, but pointed. "When we first met, you made it quite clear what you thought of farmers and their station in life." The memory of her cruel words in her father's library rose between them like a wall. She had called him common, had spoken of him as if he were livestock himself. The shame of it made her stomach twist with an emotion she rarely experienced. genuine regret. "I spoke hastily," she said quietly. "I was surprised by my father's arrangement. I reacted poorly." "You reacted honestly. That at least I can respect." Jasper began walking along the border of his property, and after a moment's hesitation, she fell into step beside him. "Tell me, Miss Ashworth, what did you think would happen to your family when you refused my proposal?" The direct question caught her off guard. I hope we would find another solution." "And have you?" She could not meet his eyes. "Not yet. Time has a way of running out faster than we expect. Your father's debts are considerable, are they not?" Cordelia stopped walking, turning to face him with a mixture of confusion and growing suspicion. "How do you know about my father's debts?" "Millbrook is a small community. Very little happens here without the knowledge of those who care to listen." His expression remained neutral, but she sensed deeper currents beneath his calm exterior. "Your father owes money to 3 separate lending houses, the local grain merchant, and 2 tailors in the county seat. The total sum is significant." "You seem remarkably well informed about our private affairs," she said stiffly. "Information is valuable, Miss Ashworth, sometimes more valuable than gold or property." He resumed walking, his long strides forcing her to hurry to keep pace. The question becomes what one does with such information. "And what do you intend to do with yours?" Instead of answering directly, he led her to a small rise that offered a panoramic view of both properties. From this vantage point, the contrast was stark. His lands green and prosperous, her family's estate showing clear signs of neglect and decline. The roof of the manor needed repairs, the gardens had grown wild, and several outbuildings stood empty with sagging doors. "I have a proposition for you," Jasper said finally. "I thought I made my feelings about your previous proposition quite clear. This is different." He turned to face her fully, and she was struck again by the intelligence in his dark eyes. "Your family needs money. I have money. But perhaps we can find an arrangement that does not require the bonds of matrimony." Cordelia's heart began to race. "What sort of arrangement?" "Work for me. Come to Thornfield House as my assistant. Help me with correspondence. Manage certain social obligations. In return, I will ensure your family's debts are settled." The proposal hit her like cold water. "You want me to work? As a servant? As an employee? There is a difference, though I understand the distinction may be lost on someone of your upbringing." His tone remained pleasant, but she caught the subtle edge beneath it. "You would have your own quarters, appropriate compensation, and your family would be saved from ruin." The offer was impossible, unthinkable. Ladies did not work, certainly not for men to whom they were not related. The scandal alone would destroy what remained of their reputation. Yet as she looked across at her family's crumbling estate, she felt the weight of desperate circumstances pressing down upon her. "Oh, why would you make such an offer?" she asked. "Perhaps I believe everyone deserves a second chance. Or perhaps I'm curious to see if the proud Miss Ashworth can learn to see beyond the surface of things." His smile was enigmatic. "You judged me quite harshly based on appearances. This would give you an opportunity to discover who I really am. And if I refuse?" "Then you refuse. Your family's troubles remain unchanged, and I continue my life as before." He gathered Thunder's reins, preparing to mount. "But consider this, Miss Ashworth. Pride is a luxury your family can no longer afford." As he rode away toward his magnificent house, Cordelia remained standing on the hill, caught between her upbringing and her family's desperate need. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the mist and revealing the harsh reality of her choices with unforgiving clarity. Work as his employee, or watch her family lose everything. Save them at the cost of her own social standing, or cling to pride while they all fell into poverty together. For the first time in her life, Cordelia Ashworth began to understand that sometimes there were no good choices, only necessary ones. 2 weeks had passed since Jasper's shocking proposal, and the walls of Ashworth Manor seemed to close in tighter with each passing day. Cordelia had watched her father age years in mere days, his once proud shoulders now permanently stooped under the weight of impending ruin. Her mother had taken to her bed with nervous headaches, leaving Cordelia to face the harsh reality of their situation alone. The final notice from Bramwell and Associates lay on her father's desk like a death sentence. 7 days remained before foreclosure proceedings would begin. 7 days to find a miracle or accept the inevitable destruction of everything their family had built over generations. Cordelia stood in the library where this nightmare had begun, staring at the empty shelves where her grandfather's collection of first editions had once resided. They had been sold last week, along with her mother's jewelry and the last of the silver. The room felt hollow, echoing with the ghosts of better times. Miss Ashworth, she turned to find Wilson, their aging butler, standing in the doorway with an envelope in his weathered hands. His uniform, once pristine, now showed signs of careful mending that spoke volumes about their reduced circumstances. "A message arrived for you, miss. The boy said it was urgent." The heavy paper bore no seal, but she recognized the bold handwriting immediately. Inside, Jasper's message was characteristically direct. "My offer stands until sunset today. After that, other arrangements must be made. J.T." Cordelia sank into her father's chair, the leather cracked and worn beneath her. Other arrangements. The words carried an ominous weight that made her stomach churn. What other arrangements could he possibly mean? "Wilson!" she called as the butler prepared to leave. "How long have you been with our family?" "Near 40 years, miss, since before your birth. And in all that time, have you ever known the Ashworths to bow to circumstances?" The old man's eyes grew sad. "I have seen your family face many challenges, Miss Cordelia, but I have also seen them adapt when necessary. Sometimes the greatest courage lies not in standing firm, but in bending so one does not break entirely." After Wilson left, Cordelia found herself walking to her mother's room. Margaret Ashworth lay propped against pillows, her face pale against the faded silk. The room still held traces of former elegance, but even here the signs of decline were evident. Threadbare curtains, a carpet worn thin in patches, furniture that needed refinishing they could not afford. "Mother, I must speak with you about something important." Margaret's eyes fluttered open, focusing with effort on her daughter's face. "What is it, dear one?" "Mr. Thornfield has made an offer, not of marriage, but of employment. He would pay our debts in exchange for my services as his assistant." Her mother's reaction was immediate and horrified. "Employment? Cordelia, you cannot be serious. The scandal would ruin us completely." "We are already ruined, Mother. At least this way we keep our home. Your reputation would be destroyed. No gentleman would ever consider marrying you after such a thing. You would be cast out from society entirely." Cordelia moved to the window, looking out over grounds that would soon belong to strangers. "Perhaps society is not worth preserving if it would rather see us starve than compromise our precious pride." "You do not understand what you are saying. To work for a man, unmarried, living under his roof, the implications alone would make you unmarriageable. And what am I now, Mother? The daughter of a bankrupt gentleman with no dowry and a family name attached to debt and disgrace. How marriageable does that make me?" The harsh truth hung between them like a sword. Margaret turned her face away, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "There must be another way. If there is, we have not found it." Cordelia's voice gentled. "This may be our only chance to save what we can." That afternoon, desperation drove her to seek her father in his study. She found him staring at the painting above the fireplace, the only valuable piece they had not yet sold, depicting the first Ashworth to own the manor. The man in the portrait gazed down with stern eyes, as if judging his descendants' failures. "Father, we must discuss Mr. Thornfield's proposal." He did not turn from the painting. "I have failed you, Cordelia. I have failed our entire family line. You have made mistakes, but we can still salvage something from this situation. by allowing my daughter to work as a servant, by accepting charity from a man you publicly humiliated?" His laugh was bitter. "I wonder what that stern gentleman thinks of his heir now. I wonder what he would think of letting pride destroy everything he built." Cordelia moved to stand beside him, following his gaze to their ancestor's painted face. Perhaps he would say that sometimes sacrifice is necessary for survival. Her father finally turned to look at her, and she was shocked by the defeat in his eyes. "If you do this thing, you understand there will be no going back. Society will never accept you again. Then perhaps it is time to find a different society, one that values character over birth, effort over inheritance." As evening approached, Cordelia made her way through the village toward Thornfield House. The grand residence blazed with light, every window glowing like a beacon in the gathering darkness. Servants moved efficiently about their duties, and the sound of fine horses could be heard from the stables. It was a picture of prosperity and order that made the contrast with her own circumstances even more stark. She was announced and led to a sitting room that surpassed anything in her own home. Rich fabrics, polished wood, and artwork that spoke of both wealth and refined taste filled the space. When Jasper entered, he wore evening clothes that would not have looked out of place in the finest drawing rooms of London. "Miss Ashworth, I confess I was not certain you would come. I have conditions," she said without preamble. "I expected no less. Please sit and share them with me. My family must be allowed to remain at the manor. Your assistance with our debts must appear to be a loan, not charity, and I will not tolerate any impropriety or suggestion of impropriety in this arrangement." Jasper nodded thoughtfully. "All reasonable requests. I agree to your terms." "Why?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. "Why are you doing this? You could have any number of assistants, people who would be grateful for the position without demanding conditions." He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the lamplight. "Perhaps because I believe people deserve the chance to prove themselves beyond their first impressions. You judged me harshly, Miss Ashworth, but you were also honest in your feelings. There is something to be said for honesty, even when it stings. And if I prove to be as difficult and prideful as you suspect, then I will have learned something valuable about character and redemption." His smile was enigmatic. "But I have a feeling you may surprise us both." As she walked home through the darkness, Cordelia felt as though she stood at the edge of a cliff, about to leap into an unknown future. Tomorrow she would begin a new life as Jasper Thornfield's assistant, trading her position in society for her family's survival. But deep in her heart, a small voice whispered that perhaps this leap into the unknown might not be a fall after all. Perhaps it might be the beginning of learning to fly. 3 months had passed since Cordelia began her new life at Thornfield House, and the transformation had been nothing short of extraordinary, not just in her circumstances, but in herself. The proud, dismissive young woman who had once declared she would rather die than marry a farmer had discovered depths within herself she never knew existed. Working alongside Jasper had opened her eyes to a world beyond drawing rooms and social obligations. She had learned to manage accounts, correspond with business partners across 3 counties, and coordinate charitable efforts that touched dozens of families. More surprising still, she had found genuine satisfaction in work that mattered, in tasks that produced tangible results rather than mere social pleasantries. This morning found her in Jasper's study, organizing correspondence that had arrived from London. The letters bore impressive seals. Banking houses, shipping companies, investment firms, all addressing him with the deference reserved for men of significant influence. She had grown accustomed to such correspondence over the weeks, though Jasper himself remained as mysteriously modest about his true circumstances as ever. "Cordelia," his voice from the doorway made her look up from the papers. Even after months of working together, the sound of her Christian name on his lips still sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "I have something to show you." He led her through corridors she had never explored, deeper into the house than her duties normally took her. They climbed a narrow stair to what appeared to be the highest tower of the manor, emerging into a circular room lined with windows that offered views across the entire valley. But it was not the panoramic landscape that took her breath away. It was the portrait hanging above the marble fireplace. The painting depicted a distinguished gentleman in formal dress, his dark eyes and strong jawline unmistakably familiar. Below the portrait, a brass nameplate read, "Lord Edmund Thornfield, Earl of Millbrook, 1798–1847. Your grandfather was an earl," Cordelia whispered, the implications crashing over her like a tide. "My grandfather built this house as his country seat. My father inherited the title, but preferred the simplicity of country life to the complexities of London society." Jasper moved to stand beside the portrait, his resemblance to the painted figure now undeniable. "When he died, the title passed to me." Cordelia sank into a nearby chair, her mind reeling. "You are Lord Thornfield, an earl, and you let me—" "Let you what? Speak honestly about your feelings? Judge me based on appearances?" His expression was gentle but serious. "You did exactly what I hoped you would do. I don't understand. For years I watched young ladies of society smile and simper in my presence, interested only in my title and fortune. I grew tired of never knowing if affection was genuine or calculated." He moved to the window, gazing out over his lands. "When your father approached me about marriage, I saw an opportunity to discover if it was possible to find someone who might care for the man rather than the position. So you presented yourself as a simple farmer. I told no lies. I do work the land. I do value honest labor. I simply allowed assumptions to be made." He turned back to her, his eyes searching her face. "And you, my dear Cordelia, exceeded every expectation." The endearment made her heart race, but confusion still clouded her thoughts. "I was horrible to you. I said cruel, unforgivable things. You were honest, brutally, refreshingly honest. And then, when circumstances forced you to look beyond surface appearances, you revealed a character I had only hoped might exist." He approached her chair, his voice growing softer. "The woman who works beside me now, who argues passionately for the welfare of tenants, who finds joy in accomplishment rather than adornment, that woman is worth more than all the titles and fortunes in England." Cordelia rose to face him, her heart thundering. "Jasper, these months have shown me who you truly are, Cordelia. Not the spoiled daughter of a gentleman, but a woman of courage, intelligence, and genuine compassion. You have transformed yourself completely." "I have learned so much," she admitted. "About work, about purpose, about finding value in contribution rather than status. But most of all, I have learned—" She paused, gathering courage for the admission that would change everything. "I have learned that I was wrong about everything that matters. And what matters? Character over circumstance, heart over heritage." She met his gaze directly. "Love over convenience." The word hung between them like a bridge, spanning the gulf of their complicated beginning. Jasper stepped closer, his hand reaching up to touch her cheek with infinite gentleness. "When you first refused my proposal, you said you would rather die than marry me. Have your feelings changed so dramatically?" Cordelia thought of the woman she had been just months ago, proud, judgmental, trapped by conventions that valued appearance over substance. That woman seemed like a stranger now. "That woman who spoke those words no longer exists," she said softly. "She died the day I chose to save my family over my pride. The woman standing before you now would consider it the greatest honor of her life to become your wife. Not because you are an earl, but because you are the finest man I have ever known. Even though I deceived you about my station, you revealed your true self slowly, allowing me to see past my own prejudices. If you had told me immediately that you were Lord Thornfield, I would have seen only the title. This way, I fell in love with Jasper the man, your kindness, your wisdom, your gentle strength. The title is merely an addition to who you already are. His arms encircled her then, drawing her close against his chest where she could hear the rapid beating of his heart. I have loved you since the day you chose work over pride, service over status. You have become everything I hoped to find and more than I dared to dream. When he kissed her, it was with the passion of months of restrained longing and the promise of a future built on genuine affection rather than social obligation. Cordelia melted into his embrace, finally understanding that true love had nothing to do with the circumstances of meeting and everything to do with the choice to see and value the best in another person. "Will you marry me, Cordelia?" he whispered against her lips. Not as Lord Thornfield asking Miss Ashworth, but as Jasper asking the woman who has captured his heart completely. "Yes," she breathed, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, with all my heart and soul." As autumn gave way to winter, Millbrook Valley witnessed the most celebrated wedding in generations. The bride, radiant in silk and lace, carried herself with a quiet confidence that spoke of hard-won wisdom. The groom, revealed in his true identity as the Earl of Millbrook, looked upon his wife with an adoration that made even the most cynical observer believe in true love. Cordelia Ashworth had indeed found her fairy tale ending, not through the accident of birth or the machinations of society, but through the courage to change, the humility to learn, and the wisdom to recognize that the greatest treasures in life often come disguised as the simplest gifts. And as she danced with her husband at their wedding celebration, surrounded by the very villagers she had once dismissed, Cordelia understood that sometimes the most beautiful transformations begin with the courage to say yes to the impossible.